Louis Knapp saw the girl in the red parka and decided to stop. It was roughly 3 p.m. on Sunday, December 1st, 1946, and Knapp was driving along Route 67A in Bennington, Vermont. A building contractor by trade, he was headed for home a few miles away. He asked the girl where she was going. "To hike the Long Trail," she said. It was a reference to a path that climbed 5 miles up Glastonbury Mountain, one well known in the area. She didn't seem dressed for it, though. It was late afternoon, and the weather, already cool, would be getting colder. Knapp figured she was a student at Bennington College, which was right near where he had stopped. He thought her a little clumsy. She had tripped climbing into his truck, but otherwise unremarkable. The two said little as Knapp neared his driveway on Route 9 toward Glastonbury. Down the road, roughly 2 miles, was the entrance to the Long Trail. "Thanks, that's swell," the girl said, and headed in that direction. A few minutes later, Knapp's daughter went outside. Route 9 was flat, and you could see a considerable distance of up to a half-mile either way. She would later tell police that there had been no sign of the hitchhiker, even though she still should have been within view. No one could walk a half-mile that quickly. The girl's name was Paula Welden, and for the next several weeks, she was the biggest story to hit Bennington in a long time. Her fate would lend credence to the growing belief that this part of the Long Trail was home to an area that seemed to harbor one story after another of people who simply vanished. So many, in fact, that it came to be called the Bennington Triangle. Though hers was arguably the most prominent vanishing, Welden wasn't the first person to disappear. On November 12, 1945, a 74-year-old hunting guide named Mitty Rivers told his son-in-law, Joe, that he was going to go off by himself, but that he'd be back in time for lunch. The group was in Bickford Hollow, near Glastonbury Mountain. The region is near the Long Trail, a more than 270-mile-long hiking path that runs along Vermont's Green Mountains, from Massachusetts toward the Canadian border. Rivers didn't make it for lunch. At 3 p.m., the hunting party went looking for him, hollering and shooting their guns to draw his attention. Over the next week, the search grew to include 300 civilians as well as soldiers from Fort Devens. Then snow began to fall. The only thing recovered was a single unspent rifle cartridge. Rivers was never seen again. Though he was a woodsman, it was reported that Rivers wasn't very familiar with Bickford Hollow and could have gotten lost, nor was a lone disappearance cause for widespread alarm. But with Paula Welden, a pattern seemed to emerge. Welden, 18, was a sophomore at Bennington College who came from an affluent Stamford, Connecticut family. By all accounts, she was a typical young adult, possessed of neither a mischievous streak nor any interpersonal drama that could boil over into something troubling. 2 weeks before being picked up by Knapp, she had been to an area near the Long Trail as part of a botany class. That may be when Welden developed an urge to explore it further. On December 1st, Welden told her college roommate, Elizabeth Johnson, that she wanted to go hike the Long Trail. It was about 2:45 p.m. Another account has Paula leaving before Johnson returns to their room. She donned jeans, a red parka with a fur collar, and what a newspaper would later describe as a pair of light shoes known as sneakers. It would be sub-freezing by nightfall. The clothes hinted that Welden expected to be back well before then. Police would later piece together Welden's movements. The owner of a gas station across the street from the college said he saw a woman matching Welden's description, playfully running up and down a gravel pit. The owner thought little of it. Not long after, Welden flagged down Louis Knapp in his truck and rode with him as far as his house. She reportedly popped back into sight about 45 minutes later, when several people reported seeing a woman hiking the beginning of the Glastonbury portion of the Long Trail. One man, Ernest Whitman, owned a nearby cabin and said Welden had stopped to speak to him. "How far can you go on this trail?" she said. "It's 4 miles to the fork," he said, referring to an area close to the top of the mountain. Whitman cautioned her about her light clothing. If Welden replied, he didn't hear it. Evening came and went, with Welden's roommate thinking little of her absence. It was possible, she later said, that Paula was studying late in another part of the college. But when morning arrived and Welden hadn't returned, she informed the faculty. The college's president, Lewis Webster Jones, phoned Welden's parents and asked if Welden had returned home. It was a chilling question. Upon hearing the news of her daughter's disappearance, Welden's mother fainted from shock. The only thing to do was begin a search. It would soon become apparent that the biggest obstacle to finding Welden was a lack of infrastructure. At the time, Vermont had no state police force, which could have provided valuable and organized resources in the way of people to lead a search. Instead, Jones and Welden's father, Archibald, arranged for an impromptu search party, recruiting some 370 faculty members and students. Jones canceled classes and dispatched groups of 20 on the Long Trail, each dispensing fistfuls of confetti so other groups would know what territory had already been covered. Still, the students knew the search was haphazard. So did Archibald, who phoned state police in New York and Connecticut for assistance. A $5,000 reward was raised. If Welden had gotten lost or caught in the cold, surely she would turn up. Or, in the worst case, her body would. There were at least 5 three-walled shelters on the mountain where a hiker could go to help protect themselves against the elements. Each had some food. None had any sign Welden had been there. Further inquiry of cabin and campground owners in the area revealed another strange wrinkle. One owner told police that 3 men had hiked up the trail around noon on Sunday. They asked him to keep a suitcase. Inside, there were articles of clothing with names written on them. J.W. Carroll, William Watts, and M. Golder. The men said they were in the service, though they didn't say why they were there. Like Welden, they didn't appear to be dressed for a long hike, nor did they ever return to retrieve their belongings. If they were involved in any foul play, it would have been quite foolish to leave their names behind. But this was the issue with the Bennington Triangle. Nothing seemed to make sense. The Welden case continued to unspool over a period of months and then years. In that time, authorities grappled with several more disappearances in and around the area of Glastonbury Mountain. It seemed eager to swallow visitors up whole. In December 1949, James Tedford, 68, boarded a bus in St. Albans after visiting relatives in Franklin, Vermont. The retired Army soldier was returning to the Vermont Soldiers' Home in Bennington. The bus stopped off in Burlington, where Tedford ran into an old friend. The two spoke for a bit before Tedford continued on. When the bus reached its destination in Bennington, Tedford was nowhere to be found. His belongings remained, along with a bus schedule. Relatives later told police Tedford seemed sad at the prospect of ending his visit. His whereabouts were never determined. The following year brought a rash of missing persons. In October 1950, an 8-year-old boy named Paul Jepson was at the Bennington town dump with his mother when he wandered away from their pickup truck. When she realized he was missing, she phoned police. Bloodhounds picked up his scent and followed it to the highway, where it vanished practically in the middle of the road near Glastonbury Mountain. Police believed that rainfall could have washed away the trail. Jepson was never found. Just weeks later, Frida Langer, 53, was camping with her family when she and a cousin slipped into a stream. Langer left, intending to go back to their campsite for dry clothes. Her cousin remained at the ravine. But when the cousin returned to the campsite, Langer was nowhere to be found. She, too, had vanished. Ultimately, Langer became something of an anomaly. 7 months later, her body was found near water. The cause of death was likely accidental drowning. Langer may have tried taking a shortcut and suffered a seizure, fallen, and drowned. Then, in November 1950, 16-year-old Martha Jeanette Jones was reported missing after hitchhiking to seminary school in Manchester, Vermont. For an entire month, her absence went unnoticed. The school assumed she was back home with her family. Her family assumed she was at school. In the span of 5 years, 6 people had disappeared under unexplained circumstances. All were in the vicinity of Glastonbury or Bennington. It was, by any measure, unusual, but there were at least indications of what might have happened. Jepson and Jones could have been kidnapped. Tedford could have dropped out of sight to avoid returning to the soldier's home. Langer's body was found. Paula Welden, however, remained the most prominent and the most perplexing. More than the others, it was Welden's case that dominated local and sometimes even national headlines, thanks to a series of twists and turns that kept raising new questions.
Within days of Welden's disappearance, a waitress in Fall River, Massachusetts, reported a significant account to the police. The waitress, Ora Telletier, claimed she encountered a patron resembling Welden at the Modern restaurant, accompanied by an older man, estimated to be around 25 years old. He seemed intoxicated and slightly agitated. As he settled the bill, the woman inquired about the distance to Bennington. "Bennington, where?" Telletier responded. "Bennington, Vermont," the woman clarified. Telletier pointed her to the closest bus station, noting Bennington was roughly 200 miles away. The woman realized she was out of money during their brief exchange. Telletier described the woman as appearing confused and was convinced she was Welden, having recognized her from newspaper photographs. Despite a thorough search in Fall River, the police found no trace. If the woman was indeed Welden, she had already vanished. Archibald Welden, receiving frequent tips of sightings, feared a young man from Stamford who admired Paula might be linked to her disappearance. This included speculation about the man spotted in Fall River, though it remained unconfirmed. A Stamford newspaper employed a private detective, Raymond Schindler, who, despite finding little new evidence, believed the situation was dire. With no concrete proof, he presumed Welden had met with foul play and was likely deceased. Schindler considered another possibility. Welden might have been confused by a similarly named trail near where Knapp dropped her off, but the harsh winter prevented a thorough search. The Weldens persisted in their search. A year after Paula's disappearance, a woman resembling her signed in as Mary Welden at a South Carolina campground. Despite the staff's suspicions and a phone call with Paula's mother, it was clear that Mary Welden was not Paula. In 1950, a Western Union courier claimed to have encountered a woman in New York who signed for a package as Paula Welden, believing she matched Paula's description. This claim was possibly influenced by the substantial reward offered for information. Adjusted for inflation, the reward would now be around $102,000. Archibald Welden, inundated with similar leads, remained skeptical but committed to investigating. When asked about his hope for Paula's survival, his response was a definitive no. Following the series of disappearances near Bennington, theories ranged from Bigfoot to extraterrestrial activity. The term Bennington Triangle was popularized by Joe Citro in 1992, drawing parallels to the Bermuda Triangle. However, the reality might be more mundane. In 2008, the Bennington Banner recounted Robert Singley's experience on the Long Trail, where Welden vanished. Singley, a composer, described the trail as bewildering, leading to disorientation despite his belief that he was on the right path. The landscape seemed to change upon retracing his steps, contributing to a dizzying sense of confusion and dislocation. Singley's hike unexpectedly extended overnight, prompting a search that ended with his discovery the next day. The Long Trail's unpredictable nature could easily lead to disorientation, especially under freezing conditions like those on the night Paula Welden disappeared. With inadequate clothing and diminishing light, she might have strayed beyond the search party's reach. Alternatively, the absence of any trace could suggest she never reached the trail, possibly indicating an abduction near the Knapp home. Despite various claims of sightings, police remained skeptical about their veracity, as numerous individuals would report seeing Paula in the aftermath of her disappearance. The cases of Welden and Singley are interconnected. Welden's disappearance was instrumental in the formation of Vermont State Police in 1947, aimed at improving responses to missing persons cases. It was this same state police that found Singley decades later. The absence of Paula Welden's remains is a mystery that led investigator Schindler to theorize someone was involved in her vanishing, possibly concealing her body. Yet, without evidence, it remains conjecture. For Paula and others, the Long Trail and its surroundings represent a journey with no conclusion.